Oh, good. We got John Ye. Oh, Doreen's coming in.
Mhm.
He's always on. We've seen every show, every episode. Albert.
All right.
Like the good old days, John.
Who's here? I can't.
Well, I'll tell you, Albert Nemiroff got very offended when I said you've been to every episode because he said, "So have I." You know, so I don't know him yet.
Live, right?
Oh, we're live. Okay.
Andy, behave now, okay?
I make no promises.
amazing.
All right.
Yeah,
Are we good to go?
Yep, we're online.
Okay.
Amazing. All right.
Great. So I'm really thrilled to be speaking with Andrew, Simon, and Lorenzo Iosco today. Andrew is the principal clarinetist of the Hong Kong Philharmonic, and Lorenzo plays with the Hong Kong Phil bass clarinet. You've probably seen them in many different capacities, doing many different things, but this interview is focusing on a very specific project that
He did not do anything, but I know.
John.
It was there when I got it.
John, put it on mute, please.
Oh, sorry about that. I thought you were able to cut my...
So we're going to be talking about a really specific project that began through the pandemic that I was introduced to sometime this winter, and I kind of dove into it and really got to know this project, which is Andy's Licorice Talk, which many people are familiar with. And I'm really excited that Lorenzo joined us as our the tech guy. But what I really wanted to talk about is kind of the behind the scenes, because I think this work is so important. And to be completely vulnerable and honest, you know, when people are like, "Oh, you should watch this interview," in the back of my head, I'm like, another clarinet interview. But when I started listening, there was something distinctly different about these interviews that really captivated me, and it began to become something that I just loved listening to when I was, cleaning my house, when I was going for a run, and so when I asked to follow up on the article that I wrote about it, I was thrilled that you both agreed. So welcome, thank you so much.
Great. I just want to say, just to knock this off. Well, first of all, thank you. It's so great to be here, and it's great to be quoted on the other end. But I'm so happy that our first mishap, and we had many in our show, involved Mr. John Ye, who's the cover story of the last ICA, because we really feel he's the third party. He was in every single episode in live time. Sometimes he'd be driving into, he was always involved. He always, every time we were searching for a word or a name, he always provided it. I mean, he's incredibly knowledgeable, and his enthusiasm, was really fantastic. So he added a lot. So it just wouldn't feel the same without him. So anyway, thanks so much, John, for joining us and making us feel like the good old days.
Yeah, thank you so much. And actually, that kind of leads me into the very first thing I want to ask, which is, and I know that John is kind of involved in the inception of this, but what was your inspiration for creating this interview series? Where did this come from?
Lorenzo, this is your big chance.
Yeah, okay. No, simply because you see how he always talks, and and actually I meet him quite often during the week, and was during the pandemic exactly last year, actually around this time we were starting thinking,
yes.
Right? So, and he knows everything about clarinets and musicians in the clarinets history, especially America, but Europe as well, Australia, Asia. And at one point I just said, look, why you don't, and then we were looking at the video, watching the videos that first horn in Chicago Symphony, David, was making these interviews. And he mentioned that, and I said, "Why you don't do that? I mean, you know everybody. This actually could be a good things for this moment of everybody are home, and we can actually, we can interview great clarinetists." And I said, "I will set up everything. You don't need to think about the techie. I will do the poster, and that's it." But at the beginning, we didn't think to interview 20 and something 28 people, like maximum 4 or 5, but then we love it, and people reactions also was very good, and so we said, okay, let's do it. And every week, it was like almost like a job, because for him, he had to study everything, the story, even if you know someone, but you know how hard it is to interview people, so you really need to know what it's about. And in my side, I had to trying to find nice picture and try to think how to compose the poster, because marketing is also important, as we know. I mean, to sell a product, you need to think about, and you need to do it extremely professional. So this is what we tried to do.
Yeah. Did you have experience with marketing before? Was this a new learning experience, or did you just learn
I didn't know, because in my past life, when I was in London, I was in the London Symphony, I had the side business selling wine from Tuscany in UK, importing. So that actually was a good thing. So I really wanted to do, because it's so important to know how to sell things. And so at the time, I really had to learn how to do marketing and stuff. So it was like going back to those days. And I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be said, because our balance is really, I think it was just the perfect chemistry. Well, first of all, I'll say this: it was almost like, because during this period, it's hard to describe. It was very fascinating doing this, because all the countries were in sort of different periods of COVID, and everyone had different kinds of restrictions. Some people were literally locked in their homes, and other places everything was free and the numbers were great somewhere else, and this would shift all the time. So in our situation, we were kind of in between, and he would come over once in a while, and so it actually became a bonding experience. He would come over, and it's like the interview series was almost a byproduct, but our differences is perfect. First of all, he's very artistic and has multi-talent, so he loves the idea of doing these posts. It was like talking. Sometimes we tried to shift the direction of the series to talk about it, and the first thing goes, great, but now we have to change the form of the posters and I'm like, come on, can we talk about what's important? No, but the color scheme, and second of all, there's a sizable generation gap. I won't say who's older than the other, but to protect the innocent. But it was really interesting. So like the kinds of people I wanted to interview and the kinds of questions I had, the people I looked up to or considered colleagues, and the people that he viewed, it was completely different. He's European. He had that aspect. I'm an American living in Asia. I had a completely different concept. He's extremely techie minded. He's looking at the people doing the videos, and I'm looking at the people who studied with someone 100 years ago, and so that was a fantastic kind of juxtaposition. But the other thing is, I'm basically just clarinet and this, and he just he just conducted us. He loves all these hats. He just thrives. So he's actually, a lot of people hopefully know that. He's truly considered one of the world's great bass clarinets. I've personally been there when Simon Rattle was pleading with him to come back to London Symphony and saying, if only played German clarinet. We were at a post-Berlin Philharmonic reception in Taiwan. If only played German bass clarinet, someone's retiring here. Concertgebouw calls him for he's really known as one of the great bass clarinetists. But as soon as we did a few of these, he was doing interviews, and people kept on saying, oh, we saw you on this interview series, waving as Andy's sidekick, and I thought he's going to be incredibly hurt. And he's like, this is so great. I'm being known for something other than bass clarinet, and for me, I almost had I almost felt like, well, I've been working my whole life to be a clarinet player, and now I'm just, interviewing people. It was like a different kind of thing. But what I realized, and people pointed out to me, it's because of my 30 plus years of doing it that I was able to have the success with this series, that I knew the people personally. And I remember Frank Cohen, who was one of our earliest guests. He said, Andy, it's you speak their language, and that connects with us in a different way. So all of it, I have a pianist who just loved it, and he would say, well, this is a culmination of your 30 years. I said, what do you mean? He goes, I was watching you interview Stanley Drucker, and you interrupted him. I mean, he was like, who would have the, courage to do that? But it was, that was all part of it. So it was really a tremendous experience all around.
So when did you buy into, like, I know that you suggested it, and you were thinking like, well, I've been trying to be a clarinet player, and now I'm going to interview. When did you buy into it and realize that this was something that was really important to do, and that the product you were producing was really special?
Right. Well, those are great questions. First of all, I don't think people understand. If we were going to do this, I think the normal thing to do, and already would be rush, is sort of take a month out, do it, plan your guests, really plan it. Who do you want? He suggested it. 3 days later, we were doing it. I literally 3 days, and this is the crazy part. We were committed to doing it weekly, so it was unrelenting. We just started it. So he said to me, "We'll do it." Actually, as you mentioned, it started with John Ye and Steve Williamson in the Chicago Symphony, who we know very well. Well, and we know David Cooper. In fact, he's played as a guest with our orchestra many times. So as has John. John's even played with us. So he said, look, Andrew Mariner was our principal clarinet, his principal clarinetist in London Symphony. He knows that I've known Andrew for years. And he says, let's do it. But the first person has to be Andrew. And immediately I got a huge kick out of it, because he had just, in my COVID included, had just retired. So his last day was something like the end of June 2019. And I met him in London and spent the day with him just a few days later. And he invited me over, and he showed me this amazing book that the London Symphony had given him. I mean, the most famous conductors and soloists all wrote letters to him. He had programs doing concertos with all the most famous conductors and soloists, and it was just amazing. And the orchestra had bought him, I think, an autograph score. Is it Last Four Songs of Strauss? Or it was so touching. I mean, he was teary-eyed and showed me, and I just kept saying, the world needs to see this, and what I remember about that trip, it was fantastic, because here I was a tour assist for a few days. I had to run back to do his l'histoire in Shanghai a few days later.
So it was my fault.
Yeah, he's finally learned. So, and I had such an English experience, because I'm a huge tennis fan. So I went with my friend to Wimbledon, okay? And his car broke down. Okay, and someone comes over and helps us get cables, and he leaves. I can't remember the guy's name, but but my friend says, he's a pretty good actor. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, yeah, he played Prime Minister Chamberlain in King's Speech. Okay, I said, no kidding. And that night I went to see Andrew, and all clarinet fans out there should know this. If you actually look at the at the credits at the end of King's Speech, they have the Mozart Clarinet Concerto. But what's amazing about it is the orchestra just plays, the whole opening, and Andrew plays, I think, 4 bars. And so just 4 bars, and he loves it. He talks about, well, I got the paycheck and everything, but I made a mistake, and there was only 30 seconds to go, and we had to take. So anyway, it was just such a great experience, such a British experience. I met 2 people from King's Speech in one day, and went to Wimbledon and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, it was just kicking out these stories. I thought the world needs to know all these stories. I mean, he had great stories about Bernstein, and I thought people would be really fascinated, but it just started as a laugh. And he mentions, ironically, because I would think he thought more of this as a show, and I was the one who later thought of it as a documentation. He brings up, when we started getting to like Michelle Zukovsky and Stanley Drucker, and Drucker's talking about premiering Shostakovich 10, premiering Shostakovich violin concerto, reading poems from Bernstein that he gave him. You know, he's talking about working with people that Mahler hired. Like, imagine they're at the cafeteria. So what was the old boss like? Yeah, well, let me tell you, when Mahler did, yeah, I couldn't believe it. And when Michelle Zukovsky is talking about, you know, studying the Copland with Benny Goodman and premiering it, not premiering it, but playing it with, you know, Copland conducting. And then I didn't know that the Berio, Brahms, first Brahms clarinet sonata orchestration, that was written for her. John Williams wrote her a piece. I sort of think first woman ever in a major orchestra, first clarinetist, second longest career ever, after longest career of anyone not named Stanley. That's our ongoing joke. And I just thought, no, this needs to be documented. These people are not going to be with us forever. Later on, we got John Curigliano on there talking about working with Bernstein. I thought, you know, we don't know where we're all going to be in 5 or 10 years, and this could be like you going back to see Mühlfeld or Behrman or something, interview talking about these pieces that were written for them. I mean, it could be really an invaluable documentation.
Yeah. So what I'd like to ask next is, I mean, it's one thing when you know someone, you know, well, and you're interviewing them, but the tone of all of the interviews is warm and very open, and you kind of were able to coax a lot of these really interesting stories that were not well known. So how did you prepare for the interviews, and what was it that you did with people that you were just meeting for the first time? How did you set that tone, and what was your process there?
Right. I mean, it still needs to be said. So many people had different suggestions, and you know, can you interview them and stuff? And it needed to be said, actually, from the, as I said, there was always the balancing. This is a live show. And I mean, it's so cool getting the live comments and all this kind of stuff, but also this is a documentation. So, but the chemistry, I really thought the chemistry between me and the potential interviewer was really what was interesting. And it needed to be preserved. And thankfully, I really knew all of them at some level. I would say most of them I knew very well. Okay, but even then, what kind of research I do? For example, Osmo Vanska, I thought it was terrific to have really an A-list conductor who had, I didn't realize he had a principal clarinet job for over 10 years. He's considered the father of clarinet playing in Finland. I mean, all the best known people studied with him, and he brought over Leicester's teachings and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, I know one of his students who teaches at the Sibelius Academy. His name is Harry Maki. So I literally set up an appointment, and I know Oswald because we've worked together, but we set up an appointment and he gave me insight to his impact on Finland and his impact on clarinet playing in the early days. In the case of Yehuda Galat, I know Yehuda, but I'm very friendly with Herman Stephenson, who's the principal of the Stockholm Phil. And he's kind of one of Yehuda's early success stories. So he had a lot to say. I also set up another appointment with him for Martin Frost, because he was a kind of a teacher of his early on, and they're great friends. So I really tried to do research on people, but it was, you're exactly right. It was the warmth. The most important thing was keeping that that feeling. I can give you a good example. Sabina Meyer, if you look on YouTube, you won't find any English interviews. You won't find any interviews more than 10 minutes, and you won't find any internet interviews. She just doesn't like them. Okay, she just doesn't like them. So I tried, I talked to her agent, no, you know, okay, fine. Even our orchestra, she's gonna play with it. No, even if you hire me as a soloist, I don't feel comfortable. Great. Michelle Zukovsky had such a disarming interview. I highly recommend it. And she's someone I didn't know well, actually, who I've become great friends with. And Wurlitzer contacts me and they say, look, we want to start an English language page on our website just for your interviews of our guests. And can I have your permission to get Michelle's? Sure. So Michelle shows up. Okay. 3 weeks later, I get a email from Sabina's husband, Rainer Vele, saying, look, we don't like these kinds of interviews. She feels it wasn't a snobbish thing. She's self-conscious about her English, the internet she can't hear well. He says it was the tone of the interview that attracted us, and we'd love to be on. So while we're trying to document things and trying to create community and everything else, maintaining that chemistry all the time was really the priority. And it was probably the easiest thing to do because I think the guests were partially chosen, on that basis.
Yeah.
I just want to remark the fact that you really made a huge work researching. I know him, he would start a month before, actually, depend, because sometimes we say, well, next week we do this person. So from the day we decided, he would study and he would, contact all the people around, which is amazing because, okay, journalists, they do that, but, he's a clarinet player. And, and that's actually, that's why also the interview, it was like 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, 2 hours. Johnny A was 3 hours, because when you have a lot of contents, then it's easy actually to go ahead.
Which speaks actually to what you were saying about the evolution, because I started realizing this is a documentation, and let's get in as much as possible. Equally, I told my guests this is a jazz solo. We just go with it. And I can't tell you, how many times we'd have a postmortem, someone would feel really bad that they said something maybe they shouldn't, or they left something out. And I felt the same way. But I think it just is what it is. It just was what it was for that moment. And we just have to accept it and move on,
Yeah. So you mentioned, the medium that this was happening. So we saw the kind of the warmth that was going on in front of the camera, but I know that there was a lot going on behind the camera, and specifically something that really piqued my interest was that Andy, you mentioned that he was kind of feeding you information about audience reaction. Can you tell me a little bit, Lorenzo, what that was like, and how did you get that information? How are you communicating this? And
Yeah, so I always was next to him, of course, out of the camera, and I had 2 computers and an iPad, because what I was interested, first of all, I liked a software or a program using for streaming. We did use Zoom for a few interviews at the beginning, but then we swapped to another one that we actually could see the comment live. So, but when we used Zoom, I had to have one computer just for the comment on Facebook Live. And also, we were looking at the number of viewing live. Not only, after a week, we could see the amount of viewing in general, but I was interested more in the live. And it's amazing because when you talk about something that interests people, you see the numbers of people viewing increasing, and when there is some funny things happening, it's going up. The case was Michelle Zukovsky, his husband, coming in and making joke and stuff, and we could see the numbers going on, because probably people are always looking at Facebook, and usually the interview live is not the audio is off. But then when you see something going on behind, you see the video, I think people were actually interested and pushing the button and then getting into the interview. So, and there was a few times like that. And so behind the scene as well, sometimes I had to tell him, like, please go on, like, oh, just cut, or depending on also what the topics they were talking about. And so this was the main thing.
Well, I'd love to talk a little bit about him, because he didn't, maybe people don't understand how much of a contribution it was. But, first of all, you talk about dedication. Our time, one of the kinks with, time zones was so difficult. He was he really wanted to get Europe in. We have actually quite a big as clarinetists, a big community in Australia. We've been there, done classes, recitals together, toured many times. And that was always a difficult one. Someone had to suffer with the time zones. But you have to understand, when we're doing Michel Zukowski, we're starting at midnight, and we're going to 3 a.m. on his birthday, and he lives an hour away. So like he would literally rent a hotel for his family, pump up on coffee, come here at midnight, go back at 3 a.m. It was a tremendous dedication. He would do a lot of fact checking. Someone would throw something out and he'd say, oh, yeah, actually it was this year. And he'd pass me a note or something like that. I mean, it was, really, really, really helpful. All the techie stuff.
But the best thing was when we had to set up, because usually at the beginning, we were completely amateur. So the first interview, poor Andrew Marner, I didn't know how, I never done a live event before. So for me, it was basically, I thought, okay, I'm just gonna push the button live and we can actually look the page on Facebook and that's it. Actually, it doesn't work like that. You have to, so the first 10 minutes, it was like a completely disaster. So he couldn't connect, I couldn't see him, and he was live and people could hear him. I mean, it was so funny. So from that time we said, okay, we need to be a little bit more professional. Let's do a dress rehearsal, maybe the few days before, so in order that we can start in time. Because also was the issue, the first 2-3 interviews we started like with 20 minutes.
No, the one really was Charlie was the second. Charlie Knighting. We started 37 minutes late, and I'm just not built that way. I'm just not built that way. I mean, Andrews was like 3 minutes late, and I nearly fainted. Okay, and it's like 30 minutes late, and poor John. You have to understand, there's people who were setting the alarm clock. There were people in California. They wrote in. We set the alarm clocks at 6 a.m. On Saturday every day. Every week. My wife wants to divorce me. My husband wants to divorce. They don't understand why I'm doing this. And these poor people set the alarm clock, and John's like, did I get the time? I remember he's taking, and I'm like, Frank Cohen, that was only about 5 minutes late, but you could see the interviews. Andy, I need to meditate now. I mean, it was really scary. And for me, the most frustrating techie thing was with Schifrin, because Schifrin, because I guess I had a loose plug or something. I had a loose plug.
I remember that, and it was
every 10 minutes, all of a sudden, the most awful look. And he was such a good sport. I mean, if I was him, I would say, call me when you get your act together, click, and he was really smiling, and I was a mess, and Lorenzo trying to plug things in.
Okay, I was trying to solve, but it was so funny because seeing him in pain, and they couldn't see me, so I love
it. He comes off like this really sweet, angelic Italian boy, but he's quite a sadist at heart, behind the scenes. The techie thing was tough, but I mean, we had crazy hours sometimes. I think Drucker Curigliano probably would have been 11 at night, and then Sunday's his only day with his family. That we tried to avoid it, but in Eddie Daniels, Yehuda's case, he gave up his Sunday morning. He came here. He really had a lot of dedication. The posters were tremendous. I mean, he was just so on top of that. The marketing, keeping, as you say, keeping tabs of numbers. He saw who's coming on. It was remarkable, the caliber of people that would come in. I don't mean that in a snobbish way, but you're having principals of major orchestras all the time coming in saying hi, and he would say, look, why don't you have a shout out? This is our friend there, and this is that past guest coming up. He would monitor all of it, and he was a great bouncing board on what's interesting, what isn't interesting, and his obsession with techie. I mean, like Michael Lowenstern. I mean, he just loved Nicola Balderu, Martin Frost. These guys were pushing the envelope in a certain way for the clarinet. And I wanted to just, I'm the old guy. I want to get Drucker. I want to get Michel Zukowski. I want to hear the stories about the good old days. But, and he was fascinated by, the younger people's techie side. And
when you have like someone like Nicola Balderu that is really revolutionary the clarinet world, he's making the clarinet like a pop almost, like everyone is watching his videos that are amazing. I told him we need to interview him because this is something really new. And, 5 years ago, you wouldn't see this kind of things. And now you actually have the ability to see, or even the bass clarinet, Lowenstein. I mean, you must interview these people.
And it needs to be said, if you look at the profile, because so many, again, the evolution was crazy. I mean, we started with, well, we're talking with this guy in England. I hope you guys want to join. And within like, I don't know, 8 interviews or something, it started becoming, agents are contacting us. They're advertising like our artist now has been asked by Andy's Licorice Talk, like as if it's the BBC or something, and manufacturers are calling us. Well, we have this hot young guy who just won this competition. He'd be perfect. And don't worry, he's good at techie. They would write in, it's because I complain, but that wasn't what I was after. I wanted, we were not promoting. Okay, we were documenting. And if you notice, all the guests were over 50, for example, with the exception of 3, I think. And you couldn't ignore them because of what they were influencing. So one, of course, was Anthony McGill. The current affairs that were going on at that time with George Floyd and all this kind of stuff and what he was contributing, it was impossible. I mean, obviously, an accomplished clarinetist and career, but that combined with all the stuff that he was doing, it was impossible to ignore that. Nicola was a great example also because, as you said, I mean, it was impossible to ignore him. Anat Cohen, I mean, I think she's downbeat clarinetist of the year like 8 years or something. Like if you're clarinetist of the year for 8 years, you could be on the show if you if you're under 50 kind of thing. So it wasn't about promoting, it was more about documenting. And I was absolutely mortified. I taught I remember I taught a Juilliard student about 2 years ago, and we were talking, and I mentioned Stanley Drucker. Okay, I mean, he's living in New York, longest clarinet, Guinness Book. He had no idea who he was, I mean, I used to get upset when people didn't know Leon Rushoff, my teacher, who's been dead for 30 years. I couldn't believe that, but I mean, and I thought, no, we need to get this down and for future generations.
And so I need to add, I have to say all the, because we had to do all the dress rehearsals, but every single guest were extremely nice and extremely, we never seen anyone like, always trying to help. And Stanley, you would imagine, how old is he, 90?
He's now 92, he's 91.
I mean, okay, yeah. So we were really worried that he wouldn't, the computer, I have to say, it was one of the quickest one to get on internet. Yeah, I told him, look, you need to install this, or you need to do, yeah, sure. And in like 1-2 minutes, he did everything. It was definitely much better than him.
Definitely.
In techie, and amazing. I mean, how sharp you can be, amazing, incredible. But every single person, including the people that we didn't know, we had some guests that all nice and, trying to cooperate and never been, so this, we need to report that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I'm still looking back. I personally can't get over the fact that we were kicking them out weekly. I mean, we didn't have time to sort of sit down and say, well, why are we doing this? What's the mission? It wasn't like that. It was like, you do it. And then Sunday I turned to them and said, well, who's next? And we, oh yeah, and we call them and you might not get back. And then, come Wednesday or something, 3 days before finally they get back. Okay, great. Do your poster, blah, blah, blah. Let's set up a techie rehearsal. Or so great. I mean, and it was like, and then immediately, like week after week after week, it was, insane. And also for me, it's really funny because you start feeling like it's a concert. Like I'm one of these guys, after a big concerto or something, I have to listen to the recording right away. It takes me 2-3 hours to wind down. Well, it's 3 a.m. at the end of Michelle Zukowski's interview, and all of a sudden people are calling you, from other time zones. Andy, I saw the show, it was fantastic. And then without fail, right, I go back and watch the whole interview again. I was that jacked. And then it's like 5 a.m, and then Sunday so that was an evolution. It took me about a dozen interviews before I could bring myself to just, okay, job done, let's go to sleep. I mean, it was like just those kind of emotional changes was a phenomenon.
So I have several questions that branched from that. The first, I want to go back to Michael Lowenstern. So, that you had this incredible chemistry where you're figuring out, Lorenzo, that, how people are engaging, and you're figuring out how to receive that information without letting anybody know. I had no idea you were getting notes passed to you. But then there was the Michael Lowenstern where you both were on screen. Who was watching the screens? What was that like changing and getting on screen, Lorenzo?
Well, yeah. So first of all, I never wanted, because he's great to do these things, but because Lowenstern is a bass clarinet player, and I know quite well because I've been following him, and he's a pilot. I love airplanes, so for me, the fact that he can, pilot an airplane. So yeah, no, so what we decided, I said, okay, I will interview the first part, but then you will take over. Also because, again, he was the one interviewing, and I really wanted to be the guy looking after the techie stuff. And, it's important, I think, to establish the rules. And okay, sometimes, it's fun to have an entrance. Actually, every interview
he made an appearance.
Yeah, I wanted to say hi and stuff, but I never wanted to. I think it's important. This is your show. I will be behind. I will help. I will do sometimes. Okay, I will come in and for certain reasons, but yeah.
And the problem was he was pretty good, and so and then I remember we talked to Yehuda Gilad, who was talking about, wow, staccato is so great depending on what language you're from. Lorenzo, you're Italian. You must have a great song. And I'm like, Yehuda, can we stop talking about things that Lorenzo does better than me? Okay, so he was getting pretty good at the interviewing thing. We know that he speaks the right language for staccato. I started thinking maybe he wants to be principal clarinet, so we got to shut this down right away. Okay, but in fairness, I just want to mention a few other things. He did make a few appearances now. One thing about the show that I actually you felt a little stressed because you have to keep up with current affairs with both the clarinet world and the real world. As I mentioned, McGill or Wenzel Fuchs, like what are orchestras doing right now? Germany was one of the first to go ahead, but it was his idea. Laurie Bloom, the Chicago Symphony bass clarinetist, had just retired, and it was quite sad. I don't know, it was about 40 years, and completely anticlimactic. He just, oh, by the way, no concerts, see you, so it was Lorenzo's suggestion, let's get him on John's show, and John very graciously shared the spotlight, and Lorenzo certainly participated in that. He also participated in a little bit we had a really fun interview with Vanya King, tennis player, and 3 trumpeters, because I was grasping at straws. I just wanted to get these guys down. So I had done a l'histoire du soldat with all of them, except the tennis player. And he had conducted, actually, as I mentioned before, in Shanghai. So he had a few comments to make there. And also, it needs to be said, while we had a purpose for the show, someone had written in, and they said, look, we've actually gotten to become fans of Lorenzo. We've been following on YouTube. I didn't realize he was that good a bass clarinetist. We're curious, what's it like being you've got the Munich competition winners, you've got the principals of Berlin. What about the guys in the section? What about, I'm in the community band. What's that like? We want to know about a little bit more about equipment and stuff, which I was trying to avoid. I thought, well, maybe there's some value. So she actually interviewed, she gave some questions to ask him, and he participated that way. So he actually, got involved several times to great success, and a little too good.
So, the other question that kind of came out, with the Schifrin interview where, there was this noise coming, as somebody who is, myself learning how to interview and getting more involved and connecting with people, I've realized that I have a lot of fears that I didn't think I might have. You think interviews, oh yeah, I'm just going to ask some questions, but it's very involved and sometimes nerve-wracking. What were some of the fears you had, or what were some of the moments that you were like, uh-oh? And for example, one of mine is I'll ask a question and the guest will be like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's stupid. You know? So what were some of the fears that you had?
Yeah, well, actually, that comes with there were a few times I actually right from the beginning I was corrected several times, and I was such a control freak. I wouldn't ask the question. I would tell them, and they said, "Well, actually, you got that wrong." You know, and you have to have a sense of humor about it. But there were a lot of nerve-wracking things. So first of all, we are dealing in a very, very sensitive time in so many ways, And don't forget, this was in the heart of one of the most heated US elections. You know, there's been all kinds of racial, international questions and also domestic questions going on at that time. A lot of political thoughts on COVID and how to handle it and everything. So it was very worrying because for me, okay, a lot of people don't see it this way. One person, for example, is Charlie Knighty, who I respect immensely. He has his own kind of what do you call it, video cast every week, and he's very, you know, he's a very bright, extremely intelligent individual, very well read and so forth, and sort of he's providing I think a reliable source of information, he feels, with all this kind of crazy stuff you're reading today. I was exactly the opposite. I thought, you know, the world has never been more divided. We're having so many trouble, especially in the music world. I mean, they're telling us we're non-essential workers, where the young people don't know what's ahead for them. The old guys don't know what's ahead. Am I going to leave the Chicago Symphony when you know, I wanted to provide 2 hours or whatever it was a week where we remind each other what we do have in common, no matter where we're from. You know, we love music. Not everyone was a clarinetist. Not even everyone was a musician. We love music. We love the clarinet. We're speaking to what makes us human right now. And then you turn it off. It's like, can you believe, you know, such and such said this or did that? You know, that's fine. But for 2 hours a week, it was an escape and an interesting one, and it was educational and so forth. So sometimes there were hints of politics creeping in, and you had to be careful. What I really tried to keep it a family show. There's people I knew that you couldn't. I'd plead with them, and they agreed, but I knew you couldn't keep foul language out. Okay, so and a certain thing, okay, you can't beat them, you know, okay, fine. You know, those kind of things. And also, you have to understand, in today's world, people love to interpret things. So, you know, you're talking to someone like Anthony McGill, and you're on, you know, I remind you, you're online for 2 hours sometimes, 3 hours sometimes. You know, you're tired, it's midnight, whatever. If you make a face, you know, people love to interpret things. All of a sudden you're on CNN, you know, like, you know, the guy who used the wrong word or something. And I'm not really that efficient. I've looked back, I'm not very efficient with my words. I mean, some people are really, you know, 5 words, they get the point across. It takes me about 5 sentences, you know, and who knows, an absent-minded word comes in and people start criticizing. So I was always worried about that kind of thing. A little bit worried what you said, but what was really ironic about it is the shortest interviews were Mariners and Balderus at like 80 minutes, okay? And that's long, okay? And I was always terrified they'd be too short. You know, I don't know why. So, and they always, and I can't tell you, if I had a nickel for every time someone said, now listen, how long is this gonna be? I've seen your interviews. They go on and on and on, 1 hour, okay? And all of a sudden you're in the second hour and they're like, wait, okay, I wanted to cut this short, but one more thing, you know, and they couldn't help themselves. And they all admitted it, you know, they couldn't help themselves. And that was great. Even my mother said, look, I saw some of your interviews, they're nice, but yeah, 3 hours too. I mean, come on.
John, yeah, that's the longest one.
Well, hey, but the trumpets was longer than his.
Yeah, but the trumpet, there were like 7 people. You know?
Yeah. No, John, and the scary thing about John is we could have gone another hour without even thinking about it. without even thinking about it. But he's very valuable, I'm sorry to say, because particularly because he watched it all in real time. He had his own impressions of the show, and you know, and he knows us so well. I mean, he's played in our section. He's come to our concerts, you know, in Hong Kong, and he himself has had such great interviews. And
but he's also, sorry, is one of the people that actually can tell you how an orchestra clarinet section works, because it's been in all the positions. I mean,
you see, that's crazy.
That's unique. You know?
That's part of the skill too. Where's the story? You know, that's what I realized. Where's the story? So John's in particular, who else has sat in every single chair in a major orchestra? And I made him say, get out every recording. Yeah, or not every, he just had highlights. Okay, this is me playing principal. This is me playing second. This is me playing E flat. This is me playing bass. You know, so that was really weird. And then we calculated together. He moved to assistant. Lori came in. No, he moved to assistant. Larry Combs went from assistant to principal. Lori Bloom came on bass. When John was, I said, do you realize everyone's sitting next to the predecessor, the Chicago Symphony? How weird is that? You know, and everyone got a huge kick out of that. So we're talking about that. And then we started calculating, well, actually in the Boston Symphony, everyone's played second at one time. And you know, so it depends how geeky you want to get, of course. But for true geeks like me and John, I mean, you know, we were just in heaven figuring these things out. Or Michelle Zukowski, same thing. I mean, everyone knows her as you know, that American clarinetist who played on the German system. But actually, you know, 8 years or something like that, she played French system. What recordings can we hear that? Oh, by the way, she played Austrian system, you know, Viennese system. Oh, there's a recording with Zubin Mehta doing the Weber Concertino on that. Great. So we're documenting all this stuff. So it depends how geeky you want to get. You know, the average person might not be that excited about it, but there is something out there now that in 20 years, if you want to explore this stuff, feel free, you know.
I think that's why I found these so important, was because of the documentation. I think we had spoken before that, you know, I think it's so important to preserve a lot of these stories, because they kind of set the tone for what it was like right now and what it was like back then and what it might be like in the future. But one of the things that I really appreciate about when we started speaking was how supportive you were about people carrying on this kind of work. So I'd like to ask a little bit about what advice you might give and why do you think it's important? Because I know you're getting a lot of, you know, you should interview my uncle. He played clarinet, you know. How can you, what advice do you give for people to start their own interview series on any kind of scale?
Yeah. Actually, you want to talk first?
No, you do. Then if you say something wrong, I will.
Yeah, I get for a change.
Which then it will happen. So okay, I will talk later.
Okay, right. Anyway, okay. Now, first of all, again, for the older guys like me, the world is insane. Okay, the idea that I could start that a friend could come over and says, listen, in 3 days, okay, you put down a microphone, make a thing, and within weeks, you know, it's actually hard. People were writing articles on us. Just we weren't doing anything. The attention came to us more than ever. The internet is the great equalizer. You don't need to be discovered in Hollywood to have a talk show. So you know, and we're nothing. I mean, there's people in you know, in kind of more popular areas that have become, you know, celebrities on the internet by doing nothing. So more than ever, for almost no cost, okay, you can do it. Anyone can do it. So there's no excuse. Now, for me, two of the biggest inspirations in this series was Anthony McGill and Charlie Nighting, because what Anthony did, I mean, he was really upset at the beginning of COVID. I mean, first of all, he's a little bit of a hypochondriac. He really feels lost without communicating with his clarinet. And within a month, he takes an iPhone, you know, plays a little tune, and you know, the rest is literally history. I mean, so this is a guy who reached more people during this period than he ever did in the peak of things. And Charlie Knight, in his interview, I said, what advice do you give? Because we need to stay proactive, and it is about giving back too. I think we were talking about for younger people, I mean, of course I'm worried for myself and people, but look, even if the worst had happened, I've had a really, really thorough career that I'm extremely grateful for. But you do want the people that are studying with you are so committed now to at least have a glimmer of hope. And that this is what he said, we need to stay proactive. Now, one thing I talked with Sean Perrin at Clarinet, you do get some wacky messages, and there's a lot of criticism out there. This is probably true for all things on the internet, from politics to whatever, a lot of criticism, but it's so easy to do yourself. So, do you want to be the person who says, well, you're lacking this, I really wish you did that? Or do you want to be the person that brings that? That's the question you need to ask yourself. And there was a lot of that. And there's so many, well, I wish we had more of this demographic. I wish you talked more about equipment. I wish you talked about the young, hot coming people. Great, do it. Yeah, and you have my blessing. In fact, I would probably, for a mini series of something you wanted to do more of a certain demographic, I would contribute. We contribute a lot of donations for various little things already, for ethnicities and things like that in the clarinet, where we're very happy to continue supporting that. So be the person to do it, be a doer, not a critic. I just want to, a great example was Sabina Meyer. Okay, here you now have a 85-minute interview of someone who her career was special because it's like a really solid 40-year career with no ups and downs. I mean, she's really always been there for 40 years, and you just can't find anything on her. And I don't know if you will. So it was under the condition that her husband, who knows her like the back of his hand, they're almost partners in everything. His English is stronger, and it's just, you can see there's a dynamic between them, and that was good. That was actually very much part of her psyche, and he was doing a lot of the talking, and it was a request of his, and I was very happy to do it. But all of a sudden, you started getting complaints like he's so rude by not letting her talk, and why can't we get a And I finally just said, yeah, this is completely. There's a few other things going on the internet. If you really don't like it, I'm sure there's something interesting out there today that you can find. Okay. Secondly, this is one of the reasons none of it was monetized. A lot of people suggested it. If you pay 80 cents for something, you're now a disgruntled customer who felt that you were misadvertising. And this was a service, and we need to take a step back and say, we now have this on the internet forever. And, how much are we going to complain about this? So, you could be the complainer, or you could be the person, or you could be the contributor. And I really, really hope that you choose the latter.
I don't have to add anything. Yeah, actually, for once, he did everything right. So
okay.
No,
and this is his best treatment of me. Okay.
I think when you have a story, the important thing is you have a content, because that's the most important thing. When you have a kind of vision of what you want, then even if you get some criticism, we actually, when we got criticism at the beginning, we were quite upset, but we decided we stick on our point. And because, at the end of the day, if you have an idea, you have to give that, and you have to go ahead, and you cannot change because someone suggested that or suggested that. Sorry, this is our vision. This is what we want. If you're not happy, fine. It's a free content anyway. So
yeah, I along those lines, I'd like to just mention a couple of things. It wasn't, it's easy to get on and say, well, there isn't enough of this or another or that. It's not like every single person agreed right away. There were scheduling things, and we knew. I mean, right now already we're tremendously busy. He just conducted the orchestra last week. I've got 2 concertos coming up and a few plus the orchestra and everything. We knew this wasn't going to be manageable forever, and it was very unpredictable. We wanted to get in this stuff and document it. So sometimes we wanted people. We asked, for example, Sharon Cam in Europe. I mean, for 8 weeks, she just couldn't manage. She really wanted to be in. She had seen some of the stuff. I went back to her at Christmas time, and she just said it just doesn't work for various reasons. She was doing a seminar, some kind of online thing, and she's not allowed to do a publicity thing that week. There was always, Doreen Ketchens in New Orleans. I mean, we thought that would have been great. It just didn't work. So sometime, once in a blue moon, someone wouldn't even respond. Almost everyone got on board, but it wasn't like, this was our complete vision for 100 people. It was cut at a certain point. We could have gone on. It was, not everyone agreed to it. I want to mention the future a little bit. There were 2 people that did commit, and one day we hope we can get them. The thing is, they're octogenarians, and they're really, one doesn't have a computer, the other doesn't have a camera. They'll need some help, and they both live in Germany, and things are fairly locked down. We understand, but one was Giora Feitman, who we do hope we can get back, and another was Carl Leister. So we do hope. I mean, again, this is a guy who would ride on Von Karajan's private jet plane, and of course Giora's, in Schindler's List and all that. I mean, I think it'd be tremendous to document them. I want to just also mention, while we're not really doing this exact series and we don't know what the future holds, I just had 2 ideas that are upcoming. One is, again, the tennis player, Vanya King, just retired 2 weeks ago. So it's not going to be an Andy's Licorice talk. This is going to be, finally, I could be my alter ego. I always want to be a tennis commentator, okay? So it's just going to be on my Facebook page, okay? And we're just going to—
No posters. No, actually.
He'll do it. Yeah. It's going to be tennis. It's no longer, but the connection with music, to heck with that. It's going to be for tennis fans, and that's going to be, actually, that's upcoming at, it's going to be 9 p.m. Eastern time next Sunday, the 1st, New York time, 9 p.m. just on my Facebook page. It'll be open, and so just what's it like to make $1 million, your first $1 million as a teenager? What's it like to hold a Wimbledon trophy, to play Serena Williams in the biggest court in the world? I just find it very, very fascinating. I don't know who else does, and she doesn't care either. What's it like to retire at 32? What are you going to do now? These kinds of questions. And then the other one, I was just, I had a really fun experience a year ago. I did a little recording. I posted a movement from Benny's Gig by Morton Gould, which was written for Benny Goodman's 70th birthday. And I had a story. The story was that I was on the Juilliard elevator as a student, and he got on. And I was completely, my stomach, and I said, you got to shake this guy's hand. I didn't have the courage. And I finally lifted my hand, and he walks off. And I said, well, there'll be plenty of other times, I'm sure. And he died that night. Okay. So it was a real regret. But a classmate of mine, Julian Milkus, at Juilliard, ended up being Benny Goodman's only student. Okay. He studied with, he was like a second son to him. And he then told me, he contacted me and he said, listen, he was there to rehearse with Homer Mensch, a bass professor at Juilliard, to finally perform Benny's Gig. As far as he knows, he had never actually performed it, and died before he did. And I started thinking, wow, this is really interesting. And then he said, along the lines of Andy's Licorice talk, he says, I gave a talk to a bunch of high school students, and they said, this is Benny Goodman's only student. And everyone's like, what's Benny Goodman? And he's like, what? So the teacher says, well, he's like the Michael Jordan of the clarinet. And everyone looks around and goes, who's Michael Jordan? Okay, which is Michael Jordan and I shared the same birthday in the same year. Well, he's like, Wade on the basketball. Oh, okay, so that's what Benny Goodman. So I thought, so Benny's birthday is coming up on May 30th. So I'm actually going to do an interview. This will be Andy's Licorice Talk, just on the backstory of Benny Goodman. What was he like as a teacher? What was he like as a person? What did he say about people? What did he do? He's I believe his daughter's writing a book now, and this guy Julian is actually mentioned in it, like substantially, like a whole chapter or something, and just all those kinds of inside things about Benny Goodman. So we're going to do that on his birthday, and I'm going to call it basically the day that changed the clarinet forever, if not the jazz world, if not the world or the music world at least. And that's going to be 9:30 a.m. Eastern time on the 30th of May. So I hope people bother to tune in for that as well, because it could be really, really fun, that one.
Wow. Those are great. Those are great projects. I want to ask it real quick, if you have the time, about your love of tennis. The very first interview that I heard, tennis came up. But also some of my favorite interviews you did were with people who are not clarinetists. How do you make those connections? And what is, like, if you were to interview the tennis people, I'm almost positive you will make a connection to music. How do you make these connections? Is this just the way that your brain works, or I mean, it's really exciting for the audience, I will say.
Oh, well, I really appreciate you saying that. Again, you're talking about, fear. I mean, we did get off the beaten track. First of all, Osmo Vanska, I thought was an interesting one. And Lorenzo, you see, who's doing conducting as well as clarinet, he loved it. I mean, he just there was so much there. I mean, at one point, probably make a lot of enemies, but Osmo says, look, how can you be a great conductor if you can't play an instrument, an orchestral instrument? If you've never, so a guy like Lorenzo, for example, he's played in opera orchestras, he's played in 4 full-time orchestras in 4 countries. He understands from a different point. Our own music director, Jaap van Sweden, who's also the New York Phil music director, he was a concertmaster of the Concertgebouw. So this was Osmo's thing. He loved that. Of course, I mean, Crilliano, for me, that was a huge feather in the cap. And then we still have the clarinet geeks like Ye and Drucker side piece. The trumpet ones I just love because I know the guy from Chicago used to play with us, so he's a friend of ours, and we know him well. And I had talked to him about his preparation for auditions. I think this is on people's mind. How do you win at Principal of Chicago on any instrument? He knows. He just did it. And then you have guys like Mike Sachs, who's my contemporary, who's been principal of Cleveland for 30 years, who's training guys or women, and that are winning jobs, and he's done the job. And you have people like Mark Gould, who has taught all these guys, and then the tennis player. But Mike focuses a lot on sports in his interview, and that's why I said I want you to ask her some questions. And I learned so much from his interviews. He's a frustrated athlete. He's the first to admit it. Now, my teacher, Leon Rushinoff, just to get geeky about it, would insist that you read The Inner Game of Tennis, which was now there's sports psychology has moved ahead, but it was a lot of in the zone and stuff. And finally, they wrote the Inner Game of Music. So that was fantastic. I don't know, we would do things and we always wanted to keep it fresh. So every few people, I'd say, you want to do something weird like Larry Gilliard. Lawrence. I knew him when he was Larry, but he's now Lawrence Gilliard. I mean, he was just a sweet kid at Juilliard, clarinet. And I don't follow the pop industry at all, but I'm turning on these, top 5, top 10 dramas, and there he is, this star on TV. What's that all about? So that was really, I thought, a very, very interesting one. And then how does that? Look at John Ye. His daughter is a very accomplished percussionist who went to Juilliard, who now has her own. She's on the Food Network. Has a successful. So this related to some people. So I thought we just wanted to keep it fresh. Every once in a while, can we grasp at a straw and go off the beaten track?
And also the fact that actually to give hope to especially students during the COVID, that some students that are probably struggling and say, should I continue doing these clarinet things, or maybe there is something else that you can do. And that's for me the most interesting thing, that just look at one thing, but look other possibilities as well. And those people we interviewed, actually, they made it. They changed it and they were successful. And so it was also another thing important to show.
For me, those moments, I think, really humanized every single person that you were interviewing in a way that made it really enjoyable for me, because when I usually watch a clarinet interview, it's just, technical to speak. But when you were doing these, it was very easy. Like I think John said, it's fireside chats. Anybody from any field could listen and find something enjoyable in there, even if they don't play clarinet. What were some of the topics that got the best responses from the Facebook Live? What were some of the times that it exploded?
Okay, well, one of that we found it was quite popular was Richard Stoltzman.
Very popular.
Stoltzman, I think he really embraced few, how you call it, different generations of clarinet players, and that we could notice. I have to say, I love Stoltzman, of course, but we always made provision like, let's see if he actually is going to be popular. Let's see, who knows, maybe and I actually. The only time I failed was with Stoltzman because I was worried that he was not going to be very popular, and I was shocked actually to see so much attention from people on Facebook. That was one of the biggest. In the principal clarinet of New York Philharmonic as well, when he was talking about the racial problem in America due to the latest accidents, that also was a very big moment as well. And then but we basically had a very kind of stable viewing and
viewership.
Like we kind of had like people like when you subscribe to a channel that they know that this is going to happen and they're going to turn on.
Exactly. That's also something. If you look at the early episodes, I'm asking the audience, should we continue? I was being, I wasn't fishing for compliment. Is this something that's worthwhile? I mean, we don't need to sit here talking about our deep, dark secrets in public. If it was, continue. But what you found is, at first, I think it was very guest oriented, which is great, which is fine. Then they became loyal viewers, so it became, okay, let's see who he has today. I don't know this guy, but I'm sure it'll be interesting, so you have to actually build a trust. Okay, I don't know that much about this person or whatever, but and that again was part of it. Like I say, the chemistry was very important. You had to always make sure that there was a trust. I just want to tell, because it's such a fun memory. I remember the first interview you saw, I believe, was Nicola Balderu, when you mentioned the tennis. I just want to reiterate that. So we celebrated, it was a Buffet Crampon anniversary. I can't, maybe 180th. And we shared a recital in Hong Kong. And we went to dinner with someone from Buffet at an Italian restaurant. In the middle of the dinner, he gets a phone call, and I'm like, well, this kid, he was a kid back, he's kind of rude, and he gets up, he starts shouting. I said, well, what's so exciting? He says, well, actually, my birthday's in 2 weeks, and my friend said, as my gift, he's taking me to the French Open tennis. I love tennis. I love the French Open. I said, well, which day? And he says, Thursday or whatever. I say, really? I'm going to be there too, right? So this is just, he flew in, we're doing this recital in Hong Kong. And by the way, we're both going to be in the same place in Paris in 2 weeks. So we met, we had a meeting place, we had a coffee together and everything. So I think we ended the interview where I said, okay, well, what's the problem? We're the French, tennis players. And what do you think, Andy? And then I got a little nervous. We're going to lose our geeky audience. But that was such a fun remembrance.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was what hooked me, to be honest, was when you began chatting like that. I really loved that you opened every interview making connections about how you knew them. What made you decide to start doing that, and why do you think that was important?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. Yeah, but I'm so happy. Maybe I'm thinking maybe I shouldn't have done that, but that's how how I did it. Yeah, I guess maybe in the back of my mind, what you're saying is that this is not just, this isn't, I've seen so many interviews, like they're not even, well, you see sports people, sometimes they're interviewed by political guys, or I see our artists for the Hong Kong Phil, they come in here, they go to the radio station and someone say, oh, so who's this? You know, yesterday was a basket weaver. Oh, today this is Yo-Yo Ma. I think he plays the cello, right? Okay, quick, you know, blah, blah, blah. I think this was like, we're all locked down right now. And this is about friends catching up. You know, and you're our friends, and you're our new family, and to see people. This is another phenomenon that blew me away. Not just in the interviews, but for example, you know, we put on a couple of recitals for the buffet page. It was, quote, my recital for Paris and his recital for Italy, and you see the audience commenting in real time, and you're like, wait a minute. There's 9,000 people watching this right now. I mean, when's the last time I played for 9,000 people, like a sonatina? And all of a sudden you have 180 comments. And I have this picture of like cartoon characters with bubbles, like they're sitting there in the bubbles, like, you know, of course the people with criticism probably were quieter, so you don't get it. But it's a tremendous feeling. And I saw Anthony, when he started getting even more high profile after his movement, they posted his Coppola concerto with New York Philharmonic, and they had a little interview with him and Alec Baldwin. And then they go to that, and everyone was commenting, and he was writing at the same time as I was also. I thought, this is just crazy. I mean, you know, it's incomprehensible to me 10 years ago that you'd be playing a concert and conversing about it with each member of the audience, you know, and that's what was going on here, that you know, we were building community, and you were just joining in a conversation amongst friends. Yeah. And I guess that's what was in the back of my mind. Like, by the way, I saw Andrew last year, you know, we hung out. Andrew, do you remember you showed me that cool book? Why don't you tell us, Andy, you remember you told me the story about when Bernstein stuck his tongue in your ear before Sibelius went? You got to tell that to our new friends, you know? And that was the atmosphere. It wasn't like, so what attracted you to the clarinet to begin with? And, you know, and do you, now that you're visiting Paris or Hong Kong, whatever, what's your favorite? Well, I really enjoyed seeing the Eiffel Tower. It provided me with inspiration for my Weber concerto. Okay, it wasn't that kind of interview, you know? It was just friends chatting. And a lot of people wrote in, they said, you know, to some people, I mean, to see Sabina Meyer, it's like they only have her on the cover of CDs. This is her live, you know, they were completely, you know, starstruck and getting into their living rooms. And by the way, Wenzel Fuchs is showing us his garden, you know, and Alessandro Carbonaro, yeah, I like to woodwork. What do you think of this? You know, and you know, it was Sabina Meyer's talking about raising her horses. And I wish we had a laptop, we could show you around our little village in Germany. This is something that you never get from these people. They're just people too, and they're worried about their students, they're worried about their own playing, they're missing it, they're depressed, you know, they feel completely at the mercy of whatever the government's saying. That all the same issues that everyone else is feeling, they're feeling it, and we're talking about it right now. And I think that was really a big part of it.
I think that those connections really opened the door for the human aspect of it, which was so touching for me. You know, I remember Sabine Meyer speaking about, you know, trying to say, well, yes, I'm a clarinetist, but I have a child, and so I'm only going to play these amount of concerts. You know, and that was so. That's something that we don't think about. You know, most of us will never be a Sabine Meyer, and we don't think about. We just think, you know, oh, that's what she does, and so it kind of gave a look into, you know, the concerns and the thoughts that she had through her career, and that was really special, I think. So yeah, the contribution that this has made is. I think larger than we even know right now. Like there's a lot of, you know, I think that as I go through it and as I go back and I listen to them, learning these things about people has reignited my interest in the things that I'm doing. And I will often think like, why am I making these decisions? What stories are worth telling? Were there any stories that you were like, we probably shouldn't talk about this? Anything that you had to nix?
Well, there were times I would steer it. Both just like, yeah, this is interesting, but it's been 5 minutes, and he could tell all the time. No interaction, the numbers go down. It doesn't. You could be telling the greatest story in the world.
You would see me behind, like,
Yeah,
doing like,
yeah.
okay,
Enough. Yeah.
Move.
And very rarely, I'm portraying myself as a control freak now, but I wanted to be in a little bit control of the interview. Once in a while, I felt I lost control. Once in a while, and because the person, it's like a political thing. Look, I want to. Yeah. So, sir, what do you think about bubblegum thefts? And they say, well, we need to lower taxes. Because people, that's the way politicians are. And once in a while you got that kind of thing. But no, I would say there was some people who were very clear before. It needs to be said. There's some topics we really don't want to talk about. I probably shouldn't mention that for that reason. Please avoid that. And they were very polite. They weren't like, if you go there, they're like, we think that's boring. No, that's not boring. No, well, we think it's boring. Okay, it's boring, and they were very polite about it. But for me personally, it's just a personal thing. A little things will get towards politics, opinions, and then we're keeping an eye on the comments, and then they're getting it, and you're like, no, we need to diffuse this, that kind of thing. So that was just me. Like I said, there's many artists, they think that this is really a great platform to express themselves and all that kind of stuff, and I respect that, and some people do it very responsibly, but that wasn't what we were trying to do. Things were too divisive in the world on many levels, and we were bringing us together and saying, what, when it's all said and done, we're human. The music reminds us of that, and we are important, despite what the governments are saying, we are important, and this is what it's about, and in 100 years, this is why we watch opera. These themes never get old. From 200 years ago or whatever, it's still jealousy and greed and everything. There's a little corny maybe, but these themes don't get old. So I can't say no. One little thing, and I still don't know if I did the right thing. I tried to steer away from geeky equipment chat. Okay. But I don't really know if I did that. A lot of people were hammering at it. What ligature is like? Oh, okay. We would have to be very careful because people would like change manufacturers and who they endorse. And of course, people were like, so why did you leave that for this? And you'd see like someone from the other company, other company there, and you're like, look, and they told us, we did afterwards. We do appreciate your having avoided that kind of stuff. I didn't want to get into there was one guy who was just please, let's talk about the ligatures, and finally, okay, what ligature do you play? And then but this one person said, look, for those of us who aren't going to be the next principal clarinet of a big orchestra or the competition winner, who are just playing in the community bands and they were loving this, we want to hear. I mean, you switch from that mouthpiece to this. Why? But maybe did it make it easier for you? So we had a little section with Paul Mayer, and I don't know if I did the right thing to this day about that. Maybe we should have had that. But this goes back to your question: should we have other podcasts or video casts? Yes, exactly. Exactly. There's people that want to hear this kind of stuff. But it wasn't. We had a limited time. We didn't know how limited, and we wanted to document the history as much as possible. To have Michelle Zukowski at 78 talking about studying with her father, who studied with Simeon Bellison. This takes us back to 100 years. Who premiered the Debussy Rhapsody with Debussy in Russia? Yeah, this is what we were trying to get down, and now we can talk about ligatures all you want, or
Yeah. I think honestly there was no wrong thing. And I think that there was something for everyone in the interviews. There was talk about musicianship, there was talk about equipment, there was a talk about the history. I think anybody, no matter what they like or what they're interested in there, I feel like it made its way in there, which is another reason why I'm the kind of person, I want to know all the secrets. I want to know all the stories. And that's what really hooked me. But I think there were times where we were talking history, and it was just such a charming series. And I think one thing that I want to mention as we have to wrap up, but the Andy's Licorice Talk has now become a platform. So I know that you are releasing like little shorts, or like educational shorts. You all released a duet that you commissioned. That was fantastic. Do you think that you are going to continue doing those kinds of things, or do you have any ideas of what you'd like to utilize that platform for? Because
yeah, no, it's a wonderful question, because I really, at one point I had to delete a lot of friends on Facebook because so many people, and I realized actually I've become very involved. That wasn't my intention, but for the sake of this show and so forth. And now I'm thinking, well, now I have all these clarinet friends I don't even know, and are we going to do anything? But okay, the real purpose we had, it's like I talked to Joseph Horowitz. He has all these fantastic compositions. He goes, but somehow the clarinet sonata just hit the number. The sonatine just hit the number. He goes, as a composer, you don't know. Okay, and it's the same thing with us. So one thing, we're very grateful. We love Hong Kong, and we thought it's really getting a bad rap in international media. So one thing, we wanted to do videos showing a lot of the beauty of Hong Kong. So that's that. Okay, so we've done it. He and I have done two. I did one with another colleague. And another thing, I don't know why, I'm surprised myself. I took a sabbatical about 8 years ago, and I decided when I came back, I'm really cutting down on teaching. I'm only focusing on playing. And now this seems incredibly important to me. I don't even know why. Incredible to just document a few things that I've learned from playing 40 years. I'm celebrating my 40th years of professional clarinets. I don't know why. I just want to do it. So I have 4 videos at home and 2 in, again, Hong Kong landmarks. Okay, so that's out, and I'm pretty much done with that. We thought at that, again, world premieres, very, very important during this period. I mean, we're suffering, composers are suffering worse. Okay, so we I premiered, in fact, I might repost after this. I premiered a work a long time ago that I just did in my living room with a cheap mic. He and I commissioned a work that we just released, as you said, by Taiwanese composer. And also we both recorded one of our colleagues' pieces for recording and our instrument, same thing, but different interpretations. We're going to put our logo on it also, and kind of put it there. So that's that. And but the truth of the matter is, it's in our hearts right now. And as I just mentioned, these 2 projects, a week ago, I had nothing. Okay. And I just woke up one day and said, we're going to do this, the Benny Goodman thing, the Vine King, because there it is. So we don't have, it's very busy right now. He just conducted, as I said, we got some chamber music concerts coming up. I have 2 video recordings, 2 concertos coming up, all in the next 2 months, plus the orchestra and teaching all. So it's very hard. If we do things, it has to be right. But we just think, but I also want to say the platform, the pages were really helpful. Like Drucker mentioned that he's the only member of the orchestra to ever become an honorary member of the New York Phil. And he's in company of like Dvorak, Andrew Carnegie, presidents, and he couldn't find it. So he sent it to me the next day. And now I have a place to post this. Or John Ye does the cover story. Great. Everyone should know about this. Or we get a cover. So we're keeping people connected little by little. And that's just where we are. But we're just taking it one day at a time, I think.
What we might do as well is at one point to restart the interviews, like the old ones, and just sharing as a premiere,
Right.
yeah, kind of live, but it's not live. But,
Yeah, I keep saying that, and we have to do. And also, I thought, I don't know if this will ever happen. The highlight reels would be wonderful. We have 50 to 60, and we have some mutual questions that I always got in, like young people's advice. Now, we could probably take 28 people and have a 2-hour reel of that. That would be inspiring. We already put together the jazz solos, which I thought was really cool. We had 3 jazz players. We had about 8 or 9 minutes together just playing for us. And so we have that. We did a memorial. I mean, this was also keeping up with current events. We had 2 colleagues that we lost from the Met, Jim Anyabene and Joe Rabai, and we did a half-hour tribute, and we had that out there. So, which, by the way, we sent on Jim's birthday to the Musicians of the Met Facebook page, and they loved it and they shared it. So like they have a huge following right now while they're not working at all, and they all were teary-eyed, and presenting this thing. So things like that. I think there's still a lot of stuff that we can get out of the past that we haven't explored yet.
Yeah. Well, I will say, and I'm just, whether I should or not, I'm going to speak for the clarinet community. Just a wholehearted thank you for taking it upon yourselves to do this project, whether, it started as just a way to, get to know people or just to do something in COVID. It has turned into something that I think it's really special, and I would like to, just speak to the clarinet community directly that this kind of stuff is so important, and I highly recommend, no matter what your platform is to continue documenting and speaking with people and learning about each other's lives. I think, as you said, we're all human here, and you did an incredible job, an exemplary job of demonstrating that hour after hour after hour, and it was just so enjoyable. So thank you so much for meeting with me, and thank you all for coming.
And thank you. It's great to be on the other side, and it's great to meet you, and you gave such a nice review of it, and it there were a lot of highs and lows, but it really reminds us that we did something.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, John.
Bye. Thanks everyone for tuning in.